Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Belimo's New Room Sensors, the Foundation of Comfort and Healthy Indoor Air, which will be presented by Eddie Kelley. We really appreciate you joining us today. My name is Audra Robinson and I will be your moderator. As a friendly reminder, these webinars are recorded and will be posted to Belimo's YouTube page. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. I invite you to ask your questions through the question box at any time, and I will read them out loud during the question and answer session. Eddie will answer as many questions as we have time for, but rest assured, if he does not have time for your question, we will answer your question via email. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please open the chat box in the right corner and let me know so I can assist you. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Eddie.
All right. Thank you, Audra. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today as we speak here about our recently released room sensors that are available with or without an integral touchscreen ePaper display. We've also developed a bunch of cool features and enhancements that can be programmed within our NFC apps, which we will be going over in detail later on in this call. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Eddie Kelley, as Audra mentioned here, and I'm currently in product management within the Sensors Meters group for Belimo Americas. As always, we don't want to take too much of your time today, so we typically target these discussion points to last around 20 to 30 minutes, which will also include a question and answer session at the end. Again, as she mentioned, as Audra mentioned before, depending on how much time we have available, we'll get to as many questions as possible, and we'll absolutely reach out via email after the call to the questions that we do not get to live here on this webinar. All right, so firstly, I want to give you all a quick overview on our discussion points here today, starting with a brief overview of the entire room sensor assortment that's currently available. We'll then hone in on the ePaper display itself, and we will follow that with a discussion point around our new non-display variants, which also have various NFC and remote monitor types of capabilities. I'll then give you guys a quick walkthrough of the NFC Belimo Assistant app itself. I mean, there are many different features and reasonings behind the use of the app. And then we'll also touch on ventilation and specifically moisture control with these devices. Seeing that these room sensors do include a selectable dew point output, I wanted to also give you guys a quick lesson on really why the market is starting to trend towards controlling using dew point versus relative humidity. We'll then kind of circle back and finalize our talk today with a quick look into the future. What variants are coming, what new features are coming, and again, of course, answering some questions that were sent in, depending on how much time we have available. All right, so let's get into this. Okay, so first topic here, and again, as mentioned, I wanted to initially give you all just a rough idea of what we have available in the room sensors portfolio as of today. So in terms of measured value, we do offer temperature, humidity, and CO2 combination room sensors. We also have passive units with that are non-active, 10K2, 10K3, PT1000, and so on. So one of the biggest features here that we're going to be discussing kind of in detail today is our set point capabilities. So again, all of our active room sensors, these are powered devices with analog outputs. They are all now NFC compatible. So whether they have an ePaper display or not, they will be NFC compatible. So we basically offer two NFC apps. One of the apps is called the Belimo Assistant app, which is used on all active room sensors. Again, this app, specifically the Assistant app, is used primarily for setup, configuration, troubleshooting, and so on. It'll also, of course, give you guys live data on measured values as well as the outputs itself. The second app that we will be discussing today is called the Belimo Display app. And this app really targets the non-display variant. So it basically brings display functionality to a smartphone remotely. So you'll be able to look at live measured values through the display app, and then you'll also be able to transmit temperature set points back to the unit as well. We'll be going into the details behind those two apps here in a few minutes, but again, the goal on that display app is to bring remote display type capabilities to your smartphone in an effort to be a bit more cost efficient, because of course they're a bit more cost effective than the integral ePaper displays here. All right, we've also recently won the Red Dot Design Award, and then as of very recent, I believe it was around 2 weeks ago, we just won the 2023 AHR Innovation Award in Indoor Air Quality. So we're definitely excited to receive those awards, and we're really looking forward to launching these in the market. We'll also be at ASHRAE as well in Atlanta, so feel free to stop by the booth and check these products out in person. All right, so now let's get to the good stuff. So as promised, I wanted to go into the weeds a bit here with the ePaper display itself, and specifically some of the features behind this product. So firstly, the display itself is fully customizable. We've been getting all sorts of questions on this. Generally speaking, every item you see on that display can either be hidden or visible, again, through the NFC app. There are also pre-programmed layouts aimed at specific applications. A couple of them, such as a VAV, for example. There's also a pre-programmed layout for fan coiled units. There's also like a sensors only option as well, which only shows the measured values. Again, these are kind of predefined. There's six layouts, but you can go in manually and hide and unhide whatever information you want to be seen. All right. All of our active units, this is for the non-ePaper display as well. So all of our active units come standard with an LED traffic light function, of course, green, yellow, and red. And the goal there, of course, is to portray immediate CO2 value. So some people can look at this color and just kind of get a quick glimpse at the overall, I guess, the indoor air quality based on CO2 levels. Those set points where the colors change, that is also fully customizable within the NFC app. And it could also be shut off. The LED light can also be shut off as needed. All right. So the display, as you can see here, it also provides touchscreen set point functionality for both temperature and ventilation. So as you can see here, we've also incorporated an eco and a max button for ventilation, which can be programmed and kind of tailored to your specific needs, depending on, of course, what application they're being used for. So the comment on the bottom left here, one of the biggest features with this NFC or NFC capabilities is the fact that we can write these settings and program the sensors without power. So this means that you're able to adjust and program the sensors while they're still in their original packaging. The NFC will connect again through the cardboard itself, so they do not need to be unsealed. They don't need to be opened. Powerless NFC means that you could basically communicate with the product and send its configuration through the packaging. So, I mean, overall, this can potentially decrease your installation time. So basically, if you pre-program these sensors within your facility or your office and so on, the technicians that are actually installing them physically on site, they won't need to go into NFC to set the products up. So again, the goal here is to save as much money and time initially when it comes to installation, setup, and so on. All right. So not only for our room sensors, but all Belimo CO2 sensors, they all incorporate dual channel sensing technology in an effort to constantly kind of combat drift as the units, of course, live in their application moving forward. We've also incorporated within these devices an automatic pressure compensation algorithm, which basically uses an internal pressure sensor, which will actively compensate for installations at various altitudes. This has been a pretty big a high point. Again, the ultimate goal here with both of these features, the CO2 and the pressure compensation, is really to remain as accurate as possible throughout the lifespan of these sensors. So again, the CO2 combats drift, and this pressure compensation algorithm, there's an internal pressure sensor that basically adjusts the measured value output based on its pressure reading. All right. So as mentioned a few times already, multiple settings, configuration, parameterization points. They are configured through the NFC Belimo Assistant app. So some of these settings, of course, include your selectable outputs, measuring ranges for temp, humidity, CO2, and you could also, again, select dew point versus relative humidity. We've also been able to incorporate, so since it's an ePaper display, we can invert the colors. So what this means is basically if you go through the NFC app and invert it, the background of the display will be black and the text will become white. So dependent in the application, low light, highlight scenarios, the inverted display can definitely be useful there as well. All right, so that's kind of a quick high-level overview of the display versions. So as mentioned, I wanted to discuss the non-display versions as well. And again, these non-display versions that do not have the integrated touchscreen display, they are able to work with our new display app. That picture in the middle is what the app will look like on your phone. And again, it's meant to bring display capabilities to your smartphone remotely. And we've also been able to incorporate the temperature set point, as you can see the dial in the middle of your screen here. All right, excuse me. So there's a lot of the same features and functionality as the display unit itself, really other than the ventilation set point. So similar to the display variants, the non-display variants also do have this traffic light function. And then of course, as you can see in the middle here, the display app gives you real-time measured values as the sensor is working in the field here. So one of the ultimate goals here, generally speaking, is really for us to provide a cost-effective non-display variant that still incorporates, some of the features that we've worked on within the display variants themselves. So really similar to the previous slide, I mean, the non-display variants also include the same dual-channel CO2 technology. They incorporate the same pressure compensation algorithm. And again, it's still the same powerless NFC circuitry. So again, all of these settings, set points, and so on, measurement ranges, measured values, units, and so on, they could all be programmed and parameterized using the Belimo Assistant app without power. So again, we've been talking about these apps here for quite some time now. I also wanted to go into the details behind what the actual Belimo Assistant app will show. So again, the goal here with this next slide is I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the app, give you a screenshot of what each section contains, to kind of give you an idea again of how our app works when it comes to setup, parameterization, and so on with these new room sensors. All right, so again, through NFC, you take your smartphone, you open up the Belimo Assistant app, you touch that smartphone to the front of that room sensor, it'll kind of trigger like a connection screen. You'll see like a loading bar come up. Once it is connected, you'll get the fantastic green check you're seeing there. And then you'll be able to go into the settings themselves for the sensor, of course, and adjust as needed. So firstly, once you're connected, you get the green arrow. The first screen that pops up is, of course, this overview slide. So you've got the green arrow. It'll have a picture of the room sensor up top. It'll give you your live measured values, and then it'll also will give you the analog outputs. So again, this is kind of a quick live readout of what's actually happening within the sensor itself. All right. So this next section here, so if you click over the little gearbox on the bottom there, brings you over to the configuration tab. So if you click firstly, so again, this is the first image that pops up when you come into that configuration tab. So each of these items has their own individual settings or parameterization points. So I'm going to quickly walk you through all of these. Don't want to spend too much time on it. Of course, we could really go into the weeds here, but wanted to give you guys a quick overview of what's behind these categories here. So clicking into the application specifically and the display categories, it allows you to name the sensor as well as customize the display itself. Again, all of those items are either visible or hidden through the app. let's see, so jumping into the temperature and ventilation set point section again. So this is where you go and set up your set points here. This section allows us to configure both of the set points. On the temperature side, it allows for absolute or relative temperature set points, as well as multiple ventilation settings. So in terms of absolute or relative, that's really, are you setting a temperature set point as a degrees Fahrenheit? For example, the image on the left, 72.5. If you hit up, it'll go up to either 73.5 and so on. It'll go up in degrees of 1 degree increments. Or if you went to relative, when you hit up or down, it would give you a +1 degree Fahrenheit, for example. So you're not calling out a set point based on an actual temperature. You're calling out the set point based on the temperature change that you're looking to work with. All right. Jumping now into the CO2 side and the system specifically category, this allows us to customize the traffic light function as mentioned earlier, and we could also change units and offsets here within the NFC app. All right. We're also able to adjust and program the various analog outputs along with the measuring ranges, which are fully customizable. So you can go in and change the analog outputs as needed for each measured value, 0 to 10, 0 to 5, 2 to 10, or MP bus with these initial analog versions. All right, jumping over now into this miscellaneous category. Again, all of these are all selectable through that main configuration tab on the app. So jumping into the miscellaneous category, we could turn NFC on and off, as well as assign a PIN code to the display app itself. Again, that display app is only used on the non-display variants. All right. One of the questions we continuously get is the NFC on and off here. So when you turn this NFC off, if you flip that to off, you will have 2 warnings that pop up. The reason why there are 2 warnings is because once it's turned off, it is killed and entirely disabled. We are not able to re-enable the NFC interface. And again, the goal here is that that's obviously a requirement for government sites, data centers, and so on. So instead of offering the ability to turn NFC back on, we figured for security protocols, it's best to completely kill and disable it, and it again cannot be reversed. So once this is done, you are no longer able to change settings, set points, and so on through NFC. All right. Let's see. So additionally, through the app itself, we could change units, turn expert mode on and off, and then we could also set a password for the MP bus protocol as well as needed. All right. So again, overall, by using the powerless NFC setup, these sensors can be fully set up while they're in the office in their original packaging. A lot of times we're not setting up just 1 or 2 of these sensors. There's potentially dozens. Think about schools, classrooms, and how many classrooms there are, and so on. So knowing that a lot of time is taken and absorbed in setting these sensors up, we're also working currently on a copy paste function. So basically, again, through the powerless NFC, you'll be able to program, for example, one of these sensors, and if you had, let's just say, 20 next to you that also need to be programmed, you could program one sensor, you could copy all of the settings, and then you could just paste those settings to each device next to it, again, through NFC. It's not available right now. It is incorporated or included a comment on it in one of the future slides here today, but we are working actively to get this released, and it will come live to, of course, through the Belimo Assistant app update. All right. So we can go into detail on that towards the end of this presentation. All right, so quickly, I kind of want to switch gears. How are we doing on time here? 19 minutes, all right, cool. So I want to switch gears now and quickly chat on really how these sensors target better indoor air quality. I know we've been talking about indoor air quality for the last 3 years, thanks to COVID. I don't want to harp on it too much. I just want to circle back and say, hey, these sensors can be used in an effort to provide optimal IAQ for our occupants. So firstly, one of the biggest recommendations for indoor air quality, especially through COVID, is ventilation, right? Bringing fresh air in, exhausting stagnant air out. All right. So these units again provide multiple ventilation set points, as well as, of course, in parallel having that dual channel CO2 sensing technology. Again, the goal is to provide accurate CO2 readings. I mean, a lot of times the ventilation is processed based on CO2 levels. So accuracy is key here. And the goal is to ventilate on demand. So really by looking at this, using the CO2 sensor technology, as well as the multiple ventilation points, not only are we just gonna bring in ventilation as needed, but in terms of the scheduling, purging cycles, and so on, you're able to effectively save a bit of energy again by ventilating on demand and using these set points depending on your application. So anyway, again, these units in terms of ventilation, they provide all sorts of features and functionality, and those ventilation set points can be programmed, again, kind of dependent on your application for the min and the max buttons. One thing that I also mentioned earlier, I wanted to touch on is dew point specifically, and why dew point is used over relative humidity. So again, through NFC, you can choose the dew point as your humidity output. Somewhat recently, I want to say it was maybe 3 years ago now, ASHRAE has adjusted and updated the 62.1 indoor air quality standard, and which now suggests controlling moisture based on dew point as opposed to relative humidity. So this has been, excuse me, this has been a pretty frequent question. I wanted to kind of take the time today with our audience here to go over really the differences between dew point and relative humidity, and specifically, why is dew point better for control versus relative humidity. So let's take a quick look and walk through an example, a real life example here using a psychometric chart on temp and humidity moisture content here. All right, so in traditional controls, using relative humidity control to control moisture in the air, that's the baseline of our example today. So right now, the initial portion of this slide is going to be using traditional controls, again, controlling moisture based on relative humidity. All right, so suppose we wanted to control a space to 72 degrees Fahrenheit at a relative humidity of 60%. So we'd be right at this point on the graph here. This point gives us on the right side a humidity ratio of about 0.01. So what is the humidity ratio? It basically measures the weight of the water in the air compared to dry air. So you could think of it as the absolute amount of water in the air, the actual weight of water, that how muggy does it feel. Those figures put us at a dew point of about 58 degrees Fahrenheit. So dew point is the temperature where condensation physically forms in the air. More or less, that's the temperature where relative humidity equals 100%. All right, so what happens if we take this temperature and it rises to 80 degrees in our office, in our classroom, in our zone, whatever it may be? Since we're controlling to a relative humidity of 60%, we slide along that curve, and as we do, you can see the total amount of water in the air increases, as well as the dew point increasing as well. The increase in dew point is not a huge deal, since the relative humidity itself is still well below 100%, which again would be the point of condensation. However, what has changed is the total mass of water in the air. And again, this will make us feel muggy. It'll make the occupants feel less comfortable, and you could really go down the rabbit hole in terms of productivity and so on there. So similarly, to give you guys the other end of the spectrum, let's see what happens when temperature is lowered. All right, so at say 65 degrees Fahrenheit, the dew point and humidity ratio, the moisture content, both drop. The space, since there's less total moisture in the air itself can feel pretty dry, right? And that has its own personal implications. I mean, again, comfort, scratchy throats, and so on. So again, these red curves is meant to show controlling by relative humidity. Now, if we want to change gears here and try to run through this exact example, controlling using dew point. All right. So let's start at the exact same place. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 60% humidity with a 0.01 humidity ratio. which gives us a dew point of 58 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. So again, by controlling with dew point here, let's look what happens when we go up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So since we're controlling to dew point, the humidity ratio is constant. So that means, again, despite the temperature being raised, no additional moisture is added to the air. So again, seeing that despite the fact that the relative humidity drops near 45%, there truly is the same amount of moisture in the air. Okay, so again, just think about the muggy feeling, and occupant comfort and so on. All right. So what happens now, again, on the same example, what happens when we drop the temperature down to 65? So again, the dew point and the humidity ratio are unchanged, but now the relative humidity is near 80%. Is this a bad thing? No, not necessarily, unless we're concerned that the temperature in the space would itself drop to 58, again, which is the dew point. If that did happen, of course, condensation would be a concern. But if we were concerned about being at 58 degrees Fahrenheit, realistically, the humidity control would be set for a much lower dew point regardless. I know I got into the weeds a bit here. We have multiple materials available online. We've done previous webinars on this topic as well. Should there need to be any further discussion, questions, and so on, again, feel free to reach out. We're here to assist with any of your application questions and needs and so on. All right, we got 26 minutes here. So this should be the last slide, and then we'll be good to go for questions. So as mentioned initially during our agenda, we wanted to give you all a quick idea of what's currently being worked on in the background and really what's going to be released relatively soon here. So firstly, we've gotten loads of inquiries on the communicating variants. So we are working tirelessly here on the BACnet and Modbus versions. They are tracking for a Q1 release of next year. So that's right around the corner. And we'll make sure we keep everyone posted as these timelines kind of come to fruition here. All right. Just a quick comment on the BACnet Modbus version. So they will incorporate all of the features we've discussed here today. And additionally, there will be a dedicated digital input pinout on these devices. So these can be used, the digital input can be used with window switches, occupancy sensors, door switches, things of that nature. All right. Secondly, again, as mentioned, we're working on a copy paste function, which will drastically save time when it comes to setting these sensors up. So that is not available now. Again, that will come as an update to the Google Play Store as well as the Apple Store for the Belimo Assistant app. So that'll happen in real time. Once it becomes a thing again, we will release some marketing material just to make sure that all of our customers are aware that that new update has been pushed. All right. This bottom right little comment here has also been a very heavily asked question. Is customization available and when? So generally speaking, yes, we are working on adding custom logos and and brands to the front of this display itself. We are also targeting a Q1 of next year release for the custom room sensors themselves. They will be black and white. It will be like a metal embossed type of logo. And again, black and white only. At the time of release, we will not be able to set up and parameterize the sensors for you. We are looking at that at a future customization release, but again, initially, we will only be able to customize and add your custom logos to the device itself. All right, so that about does it, I guess, for today's main discussion points. Now, assuming I've allowed enough time, how are we doing? I did not do the best on timing here. We'd like to open up the discussion for some of the questions that have come in. Really quickly, I've also incorporated a quick screenshot here. So these new room sensors are available on our website, www.belimo.us. You can find them under the products tab, and you just click the room sensor location right there at the arrow. That'll bring you to all of our room sensors, and again, they're updated. They're live now with pricing, data sheets, installation instructions, and so on. All right, I think I've got 1 minute here, Audra. Maybe we can answer a couple questions. And again, guys, apologies on the timing, but we will absolutely get to you guys. after the call.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Before we move on to questions, remember to follow Belimo on social media to keep informed on what is happening. We will now have a question and answer session. Please type your questions into the question box and I will read them out loud if we do not get to your questions, or if you should think of any questions after the session, you can email training@us.belimo.com. We do have a few questions in the question box. The first question I see is how many analog outputs are available?
Ooh, that's a good question. So depending on the variant, so if it's the temp humidity variant or the CO2 temp humidity CO2 variant, there will be 3 analog outputs available. And you could assign those analog outputs to the measured values, whether it be temp humidity or CO2. Or you could assign those analog outputs to the set points as well. So you could have an analog for temperature and one for a ventilation set point, for example. The temperature only device will have 2 analog outputs.
Okay, great. Second question, are there any other colors available besides white?
All right, this one's come in a few times. I like it. So right now, as of today, there is only white available. We are looking to bring in black along with the customization side. If there are any other color requests, feel free to reach out and let us know and potentially provide us with a business case. Right now, again, they're only available in white, but we're absolutely looking at bringing in additional colors in the very near future.
Okay, wonderful. And thanks for the dew point and humidity explanation. Do these sensors have any NEMA rating?
So no, these do not have a specific NEMA rating associated with them. I mean, these are meant to be installed indoors. If you do have a more harsh environment, let's say, we do offer NEMA 4, NEMA 4X options. So feel free to reach out to us on that front as well, and we can try to help you along the path there.
Okay, I'm going to read one more question. I think that is good on time. The last question I have is, are we able to directly modulate an actuator with the CO2 readings?
Okay, so that is a phenomenal application question. Depending on the actuator that's being used, so some actuators, for example, have a universal input. So if you program one of these sensors to read CO2 through one of the analog outputs, again, depending on your application, 2 to 10 volt output is an option, and you can run that signal directly to an actuator. So on that front, you could program the actuator to open and close based on CO2 levels. I would imagine the goal here is to ventilate on demand. But it's important to note that these room sensors are not controllers. They do not have built-in logic. So that feedback, the analog feedback to the actuator, will be linear. So it won't have like a curve associated with it. It won't have a deadband. But you can fully program the room sensor for its CO2 output to send various voltage signals at various CO2 levels. So on a high level, yes, it can be done. Getting a bit detailed, we should definitely take a look at the application and the need for ventilation. And again, we're here to support with any of those application questions. You can reach out to me directly or tech support and so on. We're definitely here to help you guys.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all we have time for today. Once again, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. I'd also like to thank our presenter, Eddie Kelley. If you should have any further questions, please email training@us.belimo.com. Thank you and have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.